Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's Friday, and it's the last Friday. It's the last day, work day, of 2023. And a Happy New Year to one and all. I keep saying it's the last day just because it's our last broadcast day, Julie Gunlock, which is not the appropriate thing to say. There's still 2 more days left after today of this year. And then it's New Year's on Monday, and we are here for it. Can't wait to start the new year, and we're happy to end this one with you. Coming up later this hour, we'll speak with Julie Donaldson about the Commanders and how they'd like to see 23 go in the rearview mirror. 8:05, Scott Walker, former Wisconsin governor and president of Young America's Foundation. And at 8:35, Christian Toto, film critic and proprietor of Hollywood in Toto. I'm Larry O'Connor alongside Julie Gunlock.
Good morning.
You're already drinking champagne, aren't you?
Yes.
Got a ring in the new year. Let's start it now. One of the things we like to do on the final show of the year is to take a look back on the year, and certainly in our media criticism role to sort of focus on what the media got wrong. Joining us now to help us in that endeavor is Tim Graham. He's the executive editor of Newsbusters over there at the Media Research Center Empire. Hey, Happy New Year, Tim.
Thanks. I hope it's at least a mimosa.
Oh, no, she goes right. She's got the IV drip going right now.
You said it was champagne.
Tim, it's hard not to look back. You know, you try to have a wide view angle lens here when you look at the entire year, but what we saw from the media from October 7th on, with their inability to really cover the reality on the ground in Israel, the bending over backwards to make excuses for Hamas terrorists. I mean, the perfect example that you point out over at Newsmax comes from Eric Levitz at New York Magazine, who tried to fact-check people who were talking about the beheading of babies at the hands of these Hamas terrorists. Yeah. And Mr. Pedantic shows up here on behalf of New York Magazine saying, listen, babies were found without their heads, but that doesn't mean that they were beheaded. And he was serious about it, Tim. Yeah. That's the perfect example of how the media has covered the terror attacks.
Well, and obviously they were all horrified at the beginning because here the Hamas came in across the border and just slaughtered entire families. So, but as always happens, when Israel responds, then it turns into, oh, here come the Israeli war crimes. I mean, it's sort of what happened to us on 9/11. There was a lot of very somber, serious coverage of 9/11. And then when America goes to war in Afghanistan, war crimes. I mean, it is one of those annoying tendencies that the news media have, because it's like, well, we can't possibly feel, the pain of the country that's been attacked. We somehow just have to line up with the Taliban or line up with Hamas, because that's somehow how we demonstrate our independence.
Right.
Tim, just yesterday, the New York Times had a really painful, it was really hard to read story about sort of a deep dive investigation into the sort of rapes that happened on October 7th with Hamas. I appreciate that the New York Times is finally covering this, but it took so long for them, and there really wasn't much coverage. And I have also been just shocked at the idea that Me Too, right, got so much coverage, and then you have what happened on October 11th with significant amount of evidence, and the media and many of these feminist organizations have largely been silent. Do you see that changing now that the New York Times has sort of blessed this as a topic we can talk about?
Well, you would hope so. You would hope, for example, that when the New York Times does a story like this, all the networks that think the New York Times is the best thing ever should all do stories out of it. And I think a lot of times when we see a story in the New York Times that we actually like, you ask that question, are other people going to pick this up? Obviously, in the case of Me Too, they did, and then it became a media-wide phenomenon. I'd like to think that that's going to happen. I haven't seen it yet, but a lot of times there's a great story like this, or you think this is pretty good stuff, and then people don't follow up. And yeah, I thought one of the scandals from October forward was, yes, the United Nations Women's Agency just routinely ignored it, and that's just appalling.
Yeah.
So when you look at this year in the media and know that on the horizon is yet another presidential election year, what are you what are your main concerns here, Tim, knowing the media as well as you do? They're finally sort of conceding that all of the right-wing conspiracies about COVID were actually truthful reporting and good investigative reporting at that, with regard to the origins and with regard to the actual ramifications of the lockdowns. They're finally conceding that the Hunter Biden laptop was real and not a Russian hoax. Some of them are even conceding that Russian collusion never happened under Donald Trump. Have they learned anything? Have they put any other new guidelines in place at the New York Times or the Washington Post or on cable news, or are they just going to jump on board with whatever next conspiracy hoax comes along if it fits into their political narrative?
Well, I would say B. I think that the problem we have here is, yes, they acknowledge that the Hunter Biden laptop was real. In fact, I think the New York Times did it on page 820. Wow. They acknowledge it for a minute. And in fact, I think, Larry, it was A20 paragraph 20. But I kid you not. But I think that what happens is they go into their boilerplate. So what is their boilerplate on Hunter Biden right now? Every time it comes up, there is no evidence that this is connected to Joe Biden. Yeah. Which, of course, is ludicrous on its face, because how does Hunter Biden make all that crack and hooker money without being the son of Joe Biden? But also, if you've read Miranda Devine's book, you know that Hunter Biden was paying for, renovations at Joe Biden's house. Yeah. They absolutely do not want to look into the idea of how Hunter Biden was sending money to Joe, because they have to sit there and say, we found no evidence. They have that defensive line. I think what we're going to see is that what they're all being told right now is we have to tell everybody how horrific the next Trump term could be. Right. And so Trump's going to execute people. He's going to arrest everybody at MSNBC and have them shot at dawn. Yeah. And so Rachel Maddow said that on The View, that they were going to execute people at MSNBC. And so, I don't know if there's, if we're really going to see a reckoning. Wouldn't we like to see a reckoning? I don't think there's been a reckoning on COVID. Again, as you say, they sort of acknowledged that it was not all there, but they barely touched it. They barely acknowledged it, and they move on.
Yeah. Yeah, you would think that after validating that the Hunter Biden laptop story was real, that maybe then they'd put a team on it, right?
Right.
Tim Graham, we got to leave it there. Although I happen to know that the Media Research Center it's a pretty tight ship, and you guys, adhere to some pretty strong ethical values and guidelines. How cathartic is it through the course of executing your job duties that you can say crack and hooker money when revolved?
If anybody pays attention to me or the Newsbusters podcast, it just sort of comes out of my mouth on a regular basis.
How many mimosas have you had? Okay.
Just on Christmas.
By the way, the problem is it came out of Hunter Biden's mouth too, and that's what started all this trouble. Tim Graham, Media Research. We love the work that you guys do so much, and we look forward to partnering up with you again, because next year is going to be so critically important. Thank you for keeping an eye on the media with us. Thank you,
Happy
Tim.
New Year.
Thanks.
It's 7:15. It's 7:17 here on O'Connor and Company, where we talk about everything that matters to you and some things that we just find amusing. This one falls into the latter category, probably. It's a college football season, bowl season, I should say. And last night we had what might be one of the most historic, remarkable, memorable, groundbreaking debuts of a brand new bowl. It was the Pop Tart Bowl. And I on the face of it, when you see that we have a Pop Tart Bowl, you probably think, oh my gosh, okay, this is a sign that we have too many bowls. because we have you got your granddaddies, you got your Rose Bowl, right? That's the gold standard. You want to get to the Rose Bowl. Always used to be the Big Ten versus the Pac-10. Yeah. Now it's part of the college football championships. This year it's Michigan, Alabama. This Monday, we're all excited about Michigan. Everyone's rooting for Michigan.
Not everyone.
Julie, everyone's rooting for Michigan. After losing 3 years in a row, I would think even Ohio State fans would say, okay, fine.
No.
No, it's just not going to happen. That's fine. So most people are rooting for Michigan.
I have to live with him, Larry.
But you
and he's listening.
You got the Rose Bowl, you got the Sugar Bowl, you got the Orange Bowl, the Cotton Bowl. Those are the standards, the ones that have been around for a while. Now we've got things like the Cheez-It Bowl, the Rocket Mortgage Bowl, the
Rocket Mortgage Bowl. So catchy.
It is a good one. I've tried to pick ones that aren't advertisers on our station. But you know what I mean. It would be I would love to have the Hadid Carpet Cleaning Bowl.
Yes, and I need there to be a ramen bowl.
Oh. So when they announced the Pop Tart Bowl, it's like, oh, God, here we go again. But then they executed one of the finest displays of marketing genius last night. Because at the Pop Tart Bowl, they revealed before the game with a giant toaster.
They fully embraced it. They
owned it.
They leaned in.
Yes.
They leaned into this.
You don't want to do this halfway.
They're not ashamed.
Not at all. We've got the Duke's Mayonnaise Bowl, by the way. Have you seen that one?
Gross.
All during the game, they cut to a sideline reporter who was eating different foods with Duke's mayonnaise all over it.
Ugh.
At the end of the game, the winning coach gets a giant vat of mayonnaise dumped on his head.
And then throws up.
No, but that's motivating for the team. You know those players want to see their coach get mayonnaise dumped on his head.
Good point.
Right?
That's really gross. God.
So at the Pop-Tart Bowl, they began by rolling out this giant prop toaster at the center of the field. Mm-hmm. And with fireworks and smoke and lighting effects and dramatic music like, the Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. The 2001 Space Odyssey.
Yeah, it's like watching a teenager make a Pop-Tart. The sparks are coming out of the...
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I have a little experience with this, but go on.
This giant Pop-Tart mascot emerged from this prop toaster, and he was a happy, smiley Pop-Tart.
Oh, he embraced it, man.
He did. He was all over the place. This mascot, any chance he had, he was dancing, he was doing flips, he was squeezing the butt of the ref at one point during a break.
He was very much a traditional Pop-Tart with the white frosting with the
and the sparkles
and the sprinkles.
Yeah.
As opposed to all these newfangled flavors that they have today. So
yes, the Pop-Tarts will get off your lawn, Julie.
To my childhood.
Old school. What is your Pop-Tart of choice, by the way? If you had to pick one Pop-Tart,
I'm more of the cinnamon person. Because I like the crust. See, look at all the hands going
Pop-Tart.
up, Michael.
Oh,
Professor,
everybody likes the frosted cinnamon.
Everyone
Pop-Tart.
likes it. Yeah.
Absolutely, that's what this one appeared to be a strawberry Pop-Tart, which is fine. If I'm going to have a fruity Pop-Tart, actually the cherry Pop-Tart is my Pop-Tart.
No.
Oh, cherry Pop-Tarts are good stuff. Yeah. Anyway, a giant Pop-Tart, and he's dancing and he's playing and he's doing and then during the game they announce that the winner of the first annual Pop-Tart Bowl, and it was, by the way, who was playing? Who cares? Two state schools. I think it was North Carolina State, Kansas State. Mm-hmm. ACC, Big 12. Fine.
Right.
Probably terrific basketball game, football. Anyway, but they announced during the game that the winning team, after they get the trophy presentation, will be able to devour the mascot. It's like, what the hell are they talking about? Oh, yes.
And they actually did this weird thing. Are you going to tell them?
I am, but everyone was like, at the end of the game, the mascot, the giant Pop-Tart, will be toasted and then eaten by the winning team.
Yeah,
it's
there's
like,
there's a little bit of Temple of Doom.
Totally. We are here for the cannibalism. Yeah. 1,000%.
It's disturbing.
That's what college football is all about. Let's take it to the nth degree. So at the end of the game, true to form, during the trophy, and by the way, the trophy is phenomenal. The Pop-Tart Bowl trophy it looks like your typical football trophy with a giant gold football at the top, but then on either side of the laces of the gold football are two Pop-Tarts coming out, as if the The ball
Okay,
was a
but
toaster.
back to the Temple of Doom imagery
Yes,
here.
sorry.
The toaster, the Pop Tart gets into the toaster.
He stands up on the top of the toaster, and
slowly lowered.
Yes, they slowly lower him into the heated
Yes.
coils of the giant
Yes.
toaster prop.
Yes.
And then at the bottom of the toaster, which is not how most toasters work, so I think that there was some sort of magic or trickery involved here. But at the bottom of the toaster, they open a door, and out on a conveyor belt comes
the corpse.
what looks like the mascot. Yes, the corpse.
The corpse. The baked corpse. The cake
baked,
capshaw.
Toasted, technically toasted. No longer with arms and legs. I'm guessing with a real life size Pop-Tart that runs around and walks around, that when you toast them, the arms and legs fall off in the process.
Yeah.
That's my guess.
Yep.
And this giant Pop-Tart mascot rolls out on the conveyor belt after being toasted. And the entire team, the 45-man roster of the Kansas City Wildcats, walk up, rip this thing apart, and start eating him. And that, my friends, is college football.
Yeah, a little bit disturbing. They were really, it was a little bit suddenly last summer, right? Tennessee Williams imagery there of the eating, the cannibalism, the attacking of the nice, innocent toaster oven.
I
treat.
already love college football as it is. But if you're trying to figure out how to sort of liven up the game, if at every major championship game, the winning team gets to execute, roast, and then eat the mascot of the opposing team,
You're in.
I'm just saying.
It might turn me into a football fan.
Instead of throwing all these flags to protect the quarterback, to try to make the game more exciting with a better offense, maybe they should just focus on the execution and cannibalism of the mascots.
I bet the mascot would start being a lot nicer.
And they'd certainly have a vested interest in the game. They would actually put So
we should really talk to Corey about this.
Hat tip to the Pop-Tart people who executed this flawlessly. It was perfect. As Clay Travis, who bridges the gap between sports commentary and political cultural commentary, he nailed it last night on social media. Whatever team at Kellogg's that came up with the Pop-Tart Bowl and this entire scenario, they should immediately be hired by Bud Light to fix 100%. Their brand. Whatever they've got going over there in Pop-Tart world is what's needed at Bud Light.
No, I think Pop-Tarts need to come out with a brand of beer. I don't think they need to,
Well, now, here's how these things go, though.
Because they can make anything work.
By the end of the day, we're going to learn that the Pop-Tart was actually gender fluid. And they're going to ruin everything.
They're going to ruin it.
They are.
You're right.
7:25. Coming up, more evidence that we were lied to during COVID by all the scientific experts. We'll hear their admission next. It's 7:36. It's O'Connor and Company here this Friday morning, the 28th day of December. It's the, hold on, it's not the 28th day, it's the 29th day. I've got a mislabeled document in front of me. The 29th day of December. It's the last work day of the year. When next we speak, it will be 2024. Coming up at 8:05, we're going to speak with Governor Scott Walker, and at 8:35, Christian Toto. I'm Larry O'Connor alongside Julie Gunlock. Hello, Julie.
Good morning.
One of my favorite things you've ever said on this show, it was very early on, may have been your first show here, where we talked about, if you won the lottery, what would be the first thing you get? And you said?
Revenge.
Yes, that's correct. That was a great answer. It was a great answer. So whenever I see people trying to make excuses for COVID-19.
Or asking for amnesty.
Yes, exactly. And saying, well, listen, it was the fog of war, and there was a lot we didn't know, and we were just trying to save people's lives, and so we would like a little grace. Yes. And then we'd like to move on. And I always think of you because you were not in that place. In fact, you are looking for...
I'm still not. Revenge.
Revenge. We need revenge, or at the very least, accountability and public shaming.
Or an apology. I will not. All I want is an apology.
There you go. All right. So here is the director of the National Institute of Health, Francis Collins. Now, Collins did not get a whole lot of attention because Fauci and Birx were camera whores, but he was there. He was in the room. He was making decisions. And, I remember very vividly during the entire lockdown process where I would come on the air. At the time, I was in the afternoons here on WMAL, and I was also doing a show in Los Angeles on KABC. So that's 5 hours of radio I was doing every single day. And I kept saying, the people who are making these decisions, the people who are deciding the protocols and the masking and the lockdowns and the shutdowns and the stay-at-homes and you can't go to a playground and you can't go to the beach and you can't be outside and you got to wear a mask even if you're alone in a car and all that stuff. Have they thought through the repercussions? Have they thought through what it's going to do to people, what it's going to do to children, their education, their social development, their mental health? Have they thought through the people who are not going to get cancer screenings at the hospital because they can't go to the doctor?
People are dying by themselves, dying
yes.
alone.
People who are alone and dying by themselves. Have they thought through the economic impacts about what this is going to do and how it's going to devastate businesses and the inner city and people who have put their whole lives into their family business and now then they'd want to work. They're not looking for a government handout.
Have they thought about how there will be a generation of learning loss and how that will impact these children's ability to make money and live well?
Yes.
No.
Have they thought about all the kids who, instead of going to a healthy social environment of school, they're stuck at home on the computer, on a tablet, resorting to the only social contact they have is social media. And, oh, by the way, now suddenly we've got an explosion of people who don't know what sex they are.
Well, and also have they thought about the fact that the number of child abuse cases in the hospitals skyrocketed?
Yeah. Have they thought about any of that? And based on this appearance by the aforementioned Francis Collins, former director of the National Institute of Health, they basically didn't think about it, or if they did think about it, they just didn't care.
They didn't care.
Listen.
As a guy living inside the Beltway, feeling the sense of crisis, trying to decide what to do in some situation room in the White House with people who had data that was incomplete, we weren't really thinking about what that would mean to Wilk and his family in Minnesota, 1,000 miles away from where the virus was hitting so hard. We weren't really considering the consequences in communities that were not New York City or some other big city.
I'm going to pause there because there's more that will infuriate you, but that just by itself. You know, you lived in Minnesota 1,000 miles away in a rural area. We weren't thinking about you. We were thinking about people who live in New York and Washington, D.C. That was the priority.
The important people.
The important people.
Your flyover people. Yeah.
And whenever anybody would say to someone like him or Fauci or Birx or someone in D.C., or to say to a governor of New York, and Andrew Cuomo, or a Mayor de Blasio, or someone from a big city saying, okay, fine, this may make sense for you for this highly concentrated, high population city where people rely on commuting in mass transit and they're pushed together.
Well, they can't stand far away from each other.
Right. But maybe it's not a one-size-fits-all. You can do that in your protocols in your big city, even though I don't think it's going to make that big a difference. But what about people who live in, I don't know, let's say rural Minnesota, 1,000 miles away? Why do they have to follow the same rules? It can't possibly apply to the same people the same way. That doesn't sound very scientific. And here he is saying, oh, we didn't care. We didn't think about that. And if you dared to raise that issue, you were killing grandma. When it turns out Andrew Cuomo's the one who killed a lot of grandmas.
You raised 4 kids. I'm raising 3. You know, you're raising 4 kids. I'm raising 3. And have you ever gotten in that situation with one of your kids where you get in an argument and they make a lot of sense, but you can't. You can't
right? walk it back. Yeah.
You can't walk it back,
right.
And now it's like an authority thing.
And you find yourself saying something stupid like,
right.
You know, because I said so.
Right. Yeah. Or you say, just shut up and go to your room.
Just
right?
shut up. The rules are the rules. When you're a dad, you'll understand.
I think the thing that kept going over in my head during this period was, my God, they're treating us like children. And we know that. But they actually were.
Right.
Because, you know, I know you want to go on with this, what he says, but it really is amazing because don't forget, through this, there were people making a lot of sense.
Yes.
And we've interviewed them, medical officials, that were making a lot of sense.
Dr.
And they
Scott
were told
Alice,
to
Dr.
shut up
Marty
and
McCary.
go to their room.
Oh, they were publicly shamed and humiliated.
Yes.
Scott, they did to Scott Atlas, a doctor from Stanford.
Yeah.
What they did to him to destroy his reputation.
I just think it's important that as you listen to this, remember, actually, there were people making, it wasn't the fog of war. It wasn't necessary. It was like, it was power. So just
By May of 2020, just 2 months into the lockdown, we knew that it didn't affect children. We knew that schools could be open because they were doing it in Europe. They were open in Europe.
But they could not walk it back.
They couldn't walk it because they had an election to win, in my opinion. But so now listen to it, because then he says, we weren't really thinking about it. We were just thinking about New York and highly populated cities. But then he goes on to talk about the horrific conditions and the horrific loss that he caused to Americans, and listen to how he frames it.
The public health people, we talked about this earlier, and this is a really important point. If you're a public health person and you're trying to make a decision, you have this very narrow view of what the right decision is, and that is something that will save a life. Doesn't matter what else happens. So you attach infinite value to stopping the disease and saving a life. You attach a zero value to whether this actually totally disrupts people's lives, ruins the economy, and has many kids kept out of school in a way that they never quite recover.
Collateral damage.
So collateral damage.
Collateral damage. And I remember when Joe Biden was running for president, and he said, you know what I'm going to do different than Trump when it comes to COVID? I'm just going to step away from the podium, and I'm going to let Dr. Fauci call the shots. This is the kind of person that he's talking about. The doctors, the experts, the scientists who you just said, well, let them call the shots. No, there's a reason why we have elections and we have leaders, You're supposed to use judgment. There's supposed to be someone in the room saying, I understand you're telling me that that's the best thing for the virus, but there's collateral damage here. There are repercussions. There are people who's like, and if I may, and I'm sorry, and I know this pisses people off when I say it, but Donald Trump was supposed to be that man.
Yep.
He was supposed to be the man, along with Mike Pence, along with other elected officials whose job it was to not just cede control over to the doctors and say, well, do whatever it takes. No, you were supposed to say, hold on, I know what you're saying, but people are going to get hurt by this, and they elected me to represent them. So, no, we're not going to do it the way you want to do it.
Larry, I agree with you that elected officials are specifically there to protect us against unelected, very powerful bureaucrats.
Right.
However, one thing annoys me, and I join you in your criticism of President Trump being there and allowing this to happen and ceding control to these unelected bureaucrats. However, I will tell you that it annoys me that this guy's on this sort of, quasi-apology tour, right? And one of the things the leftists and the bureaucrats always say is, well, early on it was the fog of war. We didn't know, right? We asked for grace. That grace by the left, who is now they're not apologizing, but they're excusing themselves, is never given to Trump, who at that point, it was early on and it was confusing and things were uncertain. And so I just find it irritating that not you, but those on the left are very quick to blame him, to blame those on the left, and those that were involved in these decisions are very quick to blame Trump, and so is Biden. By the way, Biden is always blaming Trump for everything that went wrong.
They blame Trump for not ceding more power over to Fauci and Birx.
Yeah.
I am not, and again, I'm not blaming Trump. I'm saying that he was supposed to be the guy who ramped it back, and I think 2 weeks into it, he realized the mistake he made.
Yeah.
But he never fixed it, and he won't even acknowledge the mistake today.
Well, that's right. That's
what bothers me. And again, that's not going to keep me from voting for him if he's the nominee. It's just I think it would go a lot further if he stepped up and said, "Boy, did I make a mistake, and I'm never going to do it again."
Never.
Here's the mistake that was made. And by the way, and my opponents, the Democrats, they go 10 times more. With the lockdowns that Fauci and these guys.
And they will.
They will at a moment's notice.
Nothing will change.
Revenge. It's 7:47. Right. All right, this New Year's Eve at FedEx, the Commanders will be hosting the San Francisco 49ers. Julie Donaldson joins us. And Julie, well, it's a tough game as you look at it on paper, especially since the Commanders seem to be just sort of playing out the rest of the season. I mean, what are you looking for? Jacoby Brissett will be starting as quarterback. Is that a placeholder move, or is there real trouble with Sam Howell now? How are you reading this?
I mean, we're not sure. Many folks say it's because Sam hasn't performed, and for as much talk as they were saying about how Sam should be the quarterback of the future, and there's a lot of faith in him over the past few weeks, the last 5 to 7 weeks, really, his numbers have dramatically declined. And it's shown that he's, maybe struggling to read the defenses, making some bad decisions, and it's not put the team in the best spot. Now, it doesn't all fall on him by any stretch of the imagination. I think there's a lot of help that this team could do around him to set him better up for success, but it's a lot for a young quarterback. So the big question, if he's that guy for the future, Larry, also falls into who's going to be making those decisions in the future, and what do those decision makers make of it. But Coach Rivera said time to give Sam Howell to take a breath and let's let Jacoby go. And Jacoby's been good. He led them on 5 touchdown drives. So his veteran presence comes out there, and what he sees helps them. And these last 2 games are not easy, the 49ers and the Cowboys.
Sam Howell is certainly a talented quarterback, and he did show some great signs this year. This is the kind of thing, though, that can really get into a guy's head. How's their relationship, first of all? Is Brissett really sort of mentoring Howell through this? Because he's been through it. And how is Sam's outlook and attitude toward all of this?
Yeah, I mean, Sam's obviously disappointed. He says he just didn't play good enough, and it's not for lack of effort or trying. But the season maybe just kind of caught up to him a little bit. I mean, he's sacked 60 times. That's the most in the NFL. He's got 17 interceptions. That's the most in the NFL. Not being able to get drives going. I can see how that would be very frustrating and try to wane on his confidence. Mm-hmm. Jacoby's been a great teammate. Jacoby came in here believing he would be able to compete for the starting job, and was quite disappointed to not have that opportunity, as they wanted to kind of see what they had in Sam. But he's a competitor. He's also a really good teammate, and he's a leader. Yeah. So he's been in full support of Sam this whole time through, and will be kind of say, hey, look, you're young in your career, and this happens, but don't let it shake you from what you can be and what you will be. So he's being a good teammate now. Sam says it's his turn to be a good teammate and sit back and hopefully kind of watch something from Jacoby and how he runs things.
Well, honestly, watching the Joe Flacco story unfold last night, if you're a talented quarterback in the NFL right now, you've got to just feel like, you know what, it's a long career, anything can happen. Just take it in stride, because it's a crazy league.
And that's a testament to Joe Flacco. I mean, he's sitting there thinking maybe it's time to turn it in, but as the injuries mount up, you never know. This is the time of year when there are a lot of injuries or situations where it's time to see how much depth does the team have and who's kept themselves ready for when that moment comes. Because I think that's the most difficult job in the NFL as a backup quarterback. Yeah. Trying to keep yourself physically ready, mentally sharp, because all it is one play and you could potentially be in there. And veterans get that. Jacoby gets that. That's why he was able to come in and, act as if he was there the whole time. So the offense is a little bit different with him and how they approach it. But they find that he gives them the best success. Of course, Larry, everyone here wants them to lose out and get that, high draft pick. But even then, we know the high draft picks don't always pan out either.
That's
right.
We're
going to see Chase Young on Sunday. He was taken 2 overall, and he's not even here anymore after just a couple of years. So it doesn't necessarily automatically mean your team will be better, but certainly it gives you chances.
And as Commanders fans feel down in the mouth and feel like, it's just terrible and it's a bad. Yeah, this is a tough season. But let me tell you something. You look at 3 of the top teams this year in the NFL are the Lions, the Browns, and the Dolphins. And just a few years ago, they were the laughingstock. So, it can turn around. All right,
Julie.
We
used to say, hey, you could be a Browns fan.
Yeah, well, listen, I grew up in Detroit, so this is
Lions,
a dream season for me right now.
My family's from Detroit, too, and they never had reason to follow the Lions through the years. And, things can change. And, there's a lot of hope with new ownership that this team will get things right, but it's not happening overnight. It just doesn't work that way in the NFL.
Well, listen, I don't know about this weekend, but I know that I'll be there at the final game because I don't care what's going on. It's always great to see the Burgundy and Gold beat the Cowboys, and that would be a great way to end the season. But we'll get there. We'll talk about that next week. Julie, Happy New Year. Have a great time at FedEx on New Year's Eve. Any time it's a Sunday afternoon at an NFL stadium watching the home team play, it's a fun day, so enjoy it.
All right. Thank you, Larry. Happy New Year.
You bet. 7:55. Coming up, it's our big 8 o'clock hour here as we close out 2023. One of our favorites, Governor Scott Walker of Wisconsin, will pick his brain about next year's presidential election and the status of the youth of America, since he is now the president of Young America's Foundation. Also, we'll talk to Christian Toto about what movies you can watch and what movies you can avoid this holiday weekend. Keep it here. It's O'Connor and Company with Larry and Julie.